Grew up in a little town called Shelby, Ohio, and I had two older brothers, and I was the little sister that kind of got everything she wanted, but it worked out okay. So we had animals, lived in the little town, but we had animals, and ended up developing a serious addiction to horses. So my parents set me up with, I paid $50 for a pony when I was, I don't know how old, and ended up doing a lot of showing, training, and all that stuff. And one of my claims to fame is that I was Ohio Paint Horse Queen in 1974. Rode around the ring like this, What my life was the horses, what other animals we had in our home, music, because I almost majored in music and went off to do that. And my dream with music was to perform in a symphony. And I oftentimes think of how my life would have been different if I had done that.
What instrument?
Flute. And so that in high school it was studying music. Horses was about what my life was about, but it was very nice. And then made it into veterinary school, which of course very, very difficult to do and very focused in my years at Ohio State. Was in private practice full-time for 8 years, and knew a long time before that I was severely allergic to animals, and finally got to the point where my doctor said I had to leave private practice, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. Kind of at that time thought it was the only thing for a veterinarian to do, and luckily there was a privately owned medical device testing laboratory right outside Toledo, Ohio, where I lived, and they were looking for their first time full-time attending veterinarian. And so I went ahead and did it, and that was in 1988, and everything kind of evolved from there.
So what was your first experience with research, or what was your first understanding of research?
Well, actually, in veterinary school, I was a work-study student for one of the top veterinary endocrinologists in the United States, and did some lab-type work for him, but I didn't really think much about it. And actually in veterinary school, in the 70s, when I was in school, the very few people who were interested in lab animal were weirdos, the strange ones, and there were only a couple of them. And so I never imagined, certainly at that time, that I would end up in laboratory animal, but I did.
Now you are the director of the office of the IACUC at Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
And this is almost 20 years from the time when you were first a member of an IACUC at Stautzenberger College.
That was one of the many places in Toledo, Ohio. I was on 5 IACUCs for a number of years. I was one of the very few veterinarians in that area that was into laboratory animal medicine and knew what was going on, and in particular knew about the 1985 amendments to the Animal Welfare Act and all the changes that were going on at that time in terms of the regulatory environment of animal research. And that was just one part of it. But the full-time position that I moved into after private practice was a challenging adjustment, because I'd prepared my career to help animals. And at the device laboratory, I was putting devices in them and euthanizing them to see what happened, basically. And it took me about a year to find out if that was really something I could do or not. And the regulatory aspects in 1988, everything was brewing, everything was getting going, and that somehow just swept me up and enamored me to the regulatory aspects, which I absolutely love now.
What was it like back then when people were just starting to develop regulations and implement them?
This laboratory already had, they didn't call it an IACUC, but they already had one that looked at the facilities the animals were in, the care they were getting, the ethical aspects of the use of these animals. And so they had a little bit of a head start even before they were required by federal regulation. So that was a nice environment to be in. The changes have been tremendous. And I think it's 22 years that I've been doing this. And the main thing I think about in those 22 years is are the animals, because that's why we're doing this. And I think things have improved tremendously. In 1988, rats and mice were just automatically kept in wire bottom cages. And they had no enrichment, no bedding. Most of them were singly housed, so they had no little buddies to hang around with. And we've come a long way. I saw obstacles with scientists who wanted, thought of the animals more as tools, which they are, and tools that have benefited not only the health of animals but the health of humans, but saw them as tools to the point where they didn't think about the fact that they felt pain and experienced distress. And that is very much at the forefront now, which is very welcome and exciting, because I consider these animals to be precious creatures.
You've always considered them to be precious creatures, so that hasn't been a particular change in your
No.
mind.
I think the main groups that I've seen communicating with the public are the veterinarians and people like me. The scientists seem to not, most of them not want to really get out there. Some of them do, and they do it very well. But it's sort of been, in my opinion, left up to people like me and people like the veterinarians to be the advocates for biomedical research, which is fine. We know a lot about it, but scientists are doing such incredible things that it would very much benefit the opinions of the use of animals in biomedical research if they spoke about the specific work they're doing and the eventual benefits it has, and giving tribute to the animals that they've used. And actually, I was fortunate enough to work for Lynn Anderson at Merck, and we had a tribute to the animals every year.
What was that?
We had a program every year where we thanked the animals for what they've done.
And who attended?
At first, the year before I got there, it was very quiet, and it was simply the people who cared for the animals and the veterinarians. But every year it got larger and larger, and we had scientists that attended and outside speakers, and real special thing, and I'm hoping to get something like that going at Columbia. In 2004 and 2005, actually before that, some of us had been talking about it because we knew that the IRB folks had their CIP, and we thought we were important enough to have one of ours. And we had some exploratory workshops in 2004 and 2005 at the IACUC conference to see if we had support and interest in the program, the possible program. And of course we did, very much so. 2005, Joan Racklin and I met with Professional Testing Corporation to talk about getting the second primer certification program going. In 2006, the task force was put together, the founding members of that credential, and we toiled and worked very hard, and our first exam was administered in October of 2007. And it's been going ever since.
About how many people do you think have participated in that program?
I asked the President Council Chair for the information, and I believe 419 have passed the exam. Many more have taken it, of course. And right now, I believe there are 373 certified professional IACUC administrators. And the reason there's a difference there is that some of them left the profession, chose not to recertify because they have to recertify after every 5 years. So it's been successful and exciting and really elevated the profession of individuals who administer IACUCs.
Is this another way of explaining to the public what research is, or this is just for the people who are doing the administration of the research?
No, it certainly could be, and there are more and more veterinarians like me who are involved in the regulatory aspects and who run offices like me at large institutions. So clearly that has to send a message that if veterinarians are involved, making sure that the use of these animals is justified, the care is humane, and assuring compliance at their institutions, certainly has to send a message to the public of how serious this is.
What do you think Primer's role is in spreading this message?
Primer's role is having the meetings that they have, the webinars, the CPA credential, all the things that Primer is already doing, I think, certainly helps the public who want to reach out and try to understand that the care and use of these animals is highly regulated. I think there's still a lot of people out there who think they're just crazy people doing whatever they want with animals in laboratories. And it's very much the contrary. And I think Primer has helped get that message across.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen myself, but I know that in past at meetings, there have been some tension-filled workshops or presentations where there were people of competing philosophies in the same room. Is that inevitable for there to be that kind of miscommunication or tension-filled discussion? Is there common ground, or what ways can you imagine communication could be better offered and received?
I'm not sure, because I think those that are on the total polar opposite ends will probably never be able to come together.
Well, going back to your previous comment where you thought that the scientists would actually, it would be very helpful if they spoke more about their work.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they? Or is there a mechanism for them to do that, or why isn't this happening, do you think?
I think they're extremely busy. Sometimes IACUC professionals are frustrated because they're so busy that they forget about their protocol that's going to expire in a month. And I consider IACUCs to be customer service units, and we do get frustrated when our customers don't remember things, but that's our job to take care of that. Also, of course, with some of the animal activism and actual physical and threats and whatnot, I think some scientists just don't want to, rather have somebody else take care of it. When I was at the medical device laboratory many years ago, I was stopped in the lunchroom by someone, a friend of mine, who knew that I was a veterinarian, knew that I loved animals, and said, "MJ, how can you stand to do the things you do to those animals?" And I knew right then that I had to do something. And so at that institution, I instituted a program where every single new employee, I didn't care if they were working with animals, if they were working in the front offices, I got to sit down with them and explain to them why it was important, the care that these animals get, the regulations that apply to their care and use. And we were even taking people back for, I say back, the back of the building was where the animals were used, taking them for tours. And when we went, I remember every time we went to the surgical suite, people would say, "This is cleaner than my doctor's office. You can do surgery on me back here any day." And it really, just little bits of information, I think, can really convince people and make them understand that, we really do care about these animals, and that's our role. I think any time those of us in this industry can reach out to the public or to people at your institution, and a very large institution, I know there are people who don't even have any idea that laboratory animals are there and that they're used for experimental purposes. So I think anytime, even in your day-to-day activities or interacting with your family and that kind of thing, that you can send the message. It was similar to when I was in private practice, because one of the biggest tragedies in terms of animals in the United States is because thousands of dogs, cats, puppies, and kittens are killed every year because nobody wants them. And that's because of sheer human irresponsibility. And so I felt if I could convince one person a day to neuter their dog, And that person convinced another person that that would eventually make a big difference. And I think it's the same way in lab animal.
Well, has there been something that you've been involved with that that you're particularly proud of, or a group that you've worked with on a project where afterwards you say, well, darn, we did a good job there, that was a good thing? Any one particular thing that comes up?
That would probably be the sepia credential. Joan gave me the opportunity to do that, and I will be forever grateful. And spent countless hours starting in that pre-sepia time until just the end of last year when I came off the sepia council, and it's a nice kind of a legacy to have, and had a lot of fun. We worked hard and made a lot of friends.
What do you think is going to be in the future for sepia? Are they anything new? Are they going to just continue doing what they're doing, or?
Probably continue what they're doing, maybe reaching out more. When we did Essentials of IACUC Administration the day before yesterday, one of the things we always ask is how many of you are CPS certified, and the vast majority of the audience are IACUC administrators. And it's usually a pretty small percentage that raise their hands. So I think there are a lot of people in IACUC administration that don't even know the credential exists. So I think there's a lot more room for outreach, and it's really neat to get a lot of IACUC administrators in a room together and talk about what the problems are and the good things and the bad things.
Do you think this has an opportunity to spread beyond the United States, or is it already?
When I was chair of the council those years, we had a few inquiries about from international, and actually the Essentials program, which of course Molly and Marky put together, we almost always have someone there from another country. But the sepia, for obvious reasons in my opinion, is very U.S. focused because of the regulations and laws, guidelines here in the United States. Could be. I don't really know.
Do you imagine that in other countries, their relationship with animals and or science is too different or so different from ours that they would not be willing to entertain some of the regulations that we have in the United States? Or
well, at Essentials 2 days ago, there was a woman there from Egypt, and she had actually attended the same session a year before. And she said, MJ, do you remember me? And I said, of course I do. And their country has no regulations pertaining to the care and use of these animals. And I think it's a special thing to see someone like her attending these meetings and wanting to form the first IACUC in the country of Egypt because of the interest of caring for these animals and the ethical things that one has to consider. But if the culture has a different attitude about animals, that could be more of a struggle.
If there's it seems like a lot of times the average person on the street doesn't understand much about how research works. And I think the average person on the street probably understands even less about the realities of animal use in research. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest misconception about animal use in research?
The misconception is that their use is not monitored and not regulated. I would say that's the biggest misconception.
And what would you say are the main points that the average person on the street needs to know?
That the federal government does oversee the care and use of the vast majority of these animals, and that there are, I wish I knew how many veterinarians are practicing laboratory animal medicine right now. I think the public would be amazed to hear that. And the professionals who are involved in assuring compliance and assuring their appropriate care and use. already, for a number of years, the species have shifted from the larger animal species down to mice in particular, and that will likely continue. There are genetically modified mice that are very, very valuable, and some people would be amazed to know, and I don't even know exactly, that some of the very valuable mice might cost, a couple $100 a piece, and most people would be amazed at that, but that's how valuable they are in investigating and even curing human diseases. And a lot of that, which everyone needs to be reminded, trickles down into veterinary medicine. So animals and humans both benefit from the research that goes on with animals. And there is a lot of research that goes on in veterinary medicine, and a lot of people don't realize that. And when I was at Ohio State, and this was many years ago, of course, they were doing the very pivotal work on feline leukemia. And there were a lot of cats who lost their lives in that research, but as a result, most cats today don't have to battle that disease. As I mentioned years ago, animals were pretty much used as tools and did not have what we call enrichment. And if you go into a room full of mouse cages, you'll see animals that are housed together because they're social animals and they like to be together. They're given nesting material because they obviously, when they live wherever they live in nature, they make nests and they huddle together. And so they're given those kinds of things, and enrichment has become a part of the industry. And rodents even have little things, to run on, and little igloos to get into, and all sorts of neat things to make their environment to be as much as what it would be naturally, because that makes them healthier, happier animals to be used for experiments.
So a laboratory that has animals in it is not just rows and rows of, like in the movies you always just see, it's rows and rows of cages just stacked on top of each other. It's not really like that at all.
No, it is like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of it's because of the cost of space, and research is very expensive to do. And mice, of course, reproduce rapidly, and they're small, much easier to house than some of the larger species. But in their own little world, in their own little cage, they've got everything they need.